Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on industry-university collaboration for enhancing employability. It's really wonderful to see our attendees constantly joining us, and this gives you a feel for the participants that we have. We have participation from 17 countries, primarily across the African continent, but we do have a couple of countries further afield, which is great to see. The pie chart that you see there gives you a sense of the breakup. This pie chart is as of this morning. I am aware that a good number of people have actually registered during the course of the day. So that pie chart is not current anymore. We did update the countries for the participants though. So we have those 17 countries. So really welcome to you all. A real warm welcome from all of us at Botu University to this webinar on industry-university collaboration. We hope you find it useful and we look forward to questions from yourselves. Just quickly in terms of questions, for anyone who wishes to ask questions when any of the panelists are speaking or at any point, on your screen at the bottom, you will see an icon that says Q&A. If you click on that, you can then type out a question there, which we will then come to. And obviously, time permitting, we would love to get to all questions, which is my goal. But of course, if that's not possible, please do forgive us. But we will try our best to get to every question. So please use that. Of course, we have the chat box as well. Although if the chat gets very busy, we might miss questions on that. So it's better to raise your questions on the Q&A box directly. All right, wonderful. So I think it's time now for us to introduce myself and our panelists to all of you. So first up, myself, I will be the moderator today. My name is Ananth Ram. I am the Pro Vice Chancellor for Strategy at Botu University. And Botu University is a multidisciplinary university. We have campuses in Botswana, in Lesotho, in Namibia, and Eswatini. And we also have students across the continent that study with us on blended and distance learning. We have three fantastic panelists today who bring quite a bit of experience. Our first panelist is Mr. Lerata Pekane. He is a chartered accountant and he's a past president of the Lesotho Institute of Accountants. He's been a partner at New Dawn Chartered Accountants, and through that, he's been exposed to quite a bit of experience in financial, taxation, audit, and governance related issues over the almost 2 decades that he's worked in industry. He is currently the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Small Business Development, Cooperatives and Marketing in Lesotho. He's a member of several boards of directors and actually chairs a number of them. And he still remains a serial entrepreneur. He's a founder and patron of I Am a Change Agent social enterprise movement. So we're very fortunate to have somebody like Mr. Pekane with us, because not only does he bring in the industry experience, but being also part of government, he can bring that perspective to the discussion as well. Mr. Pekane, thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. Thank you. Our second panelist is Mr. Adolf Ndafenongo. He is a manager for special projects and innovation at MTC in Namibia. He's trained as a computer scientist and is a results-oriented executive with well over 9 years experience in digital transformation and project management. He is passionate about helping organizations and companies to design and create digital solutions that transform their users from technology consumers to creators. So I think, again, very, very fortunate to have Mr. Adolf with us today. Not only does he bring to the table, again, the industry experience, but the best part about his background is his appreciation of digital solutions and digital technology. As we all know, the current pandemic has really accelerated the transformation on the digital side. And I think his input in terms of what it means for employability of graduates in that will be very important. Mr. Adolf, a real pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for joining us today. Right, and our third speaker today is Mr. Mandla Lupondvo. He is the MTN Eswatini Corporate Affairs Manager. He has experience in development communication, emergency communication, behavior change communication, advocacy, and corporate communication. He's worked with World Vision International, the National Emergency Response Council on HIV and AIDS, just to mention a few. And he has a professional certificate in public relations, secondary teacher's diploma in commercial teaching. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Science, an honors Bachelor of Arts in Theology, and has done a mini MBA in telecommunications and is currently doing an MA. Mr. Mandla, again, comes from industry, so brings that experience. But to me, one of the most valuable parts is his background in communications and the work he's done on that side, because I believe that's one of the most important skills. Communication, collaborative skills are very important for graduates in terms of employability in the world out there today. So, Mr. Mandla, real pleasure that you've been able to join us. Thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. Right, I think before I hand it over to our panelists, I wanted to just give everybody a brief appreciation of how industry-university collaboration works at Botha University and give you a flavor of the various ways in which we collaborate. However, first and foremost, anything that we do with industry is based around what we call the Botha graduate profile, and that sits at the center of our interaction with industry. The graduate profile describes what we wish to produce as a graduate. What are the 21st century skills they need in order to be employable and create employment? And I will touch very briefly on what is our Botha graduate profile in the next slide. So areas in which we work with industry, first and foremost, program strategy. So right at the beginning, when we are deciding what kind of programs we want to offer, we sit with our industry reference fora and get an appreciation of where industry is going. What are the developments that are happening? And what kind of programs should we be bringing out? What kind of skills are industry looking for? And how can we do that? So right up front, program strategy is the first place where we collaborate with them. And then when we actually go down a program and start developing the curriculum for it, again, industry is involved. We have an industry advisor specifically for every single program that we're developing, and they advise us through the process and are a critical part of the curriculum development framework that we use. Third is work integrated learning. Very important. The fact that students have to actually go and spend time in industry as part of their learning at university. And I'll give you two examples of how we do this. One is through internships. So in our larger programs like our degrees, we have a semester-long internship where students go to industry and actually work on skills that they've learned, and they actually get assessed on that. So it's a critical part of their performance and their ability to graduate from the program. Another example is a recent development where we're working with a German university to launch a totally work-integrated hospitality management program, where students literally spend half the time in university and half the time in industry in order to get a balanced view and come out when they graduate with the key skills required from industry from day one. A fourth example is what we call Innovation for Sustainable Development. This is a project that we're working on with KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, in partnership with Strathmore University in Kenya and University of Dar es Salaam. So here we bring industry and community to give us challenges that they're facing, and we bring groups of students together to use design thinking concepts to try and address these challenges, constantly keeping in mind the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the background. We also bring industry in as guest lecturers and as judges. We have a number of innovation-related competitions and programs on campuses, and we bring industry in as judges for those programs. We have an incubator in one of our campuses here in Botswana, and we bring mentors from industry to mentor the residents of that incubator as they try and build on their ideas and grow their startup companies. Of course, graduate recruitment is fundamental. right? We work very closely with industry to help them place our graduates. And last but not least is research support, right? Again, very important because just to give an example, we have a major project on right now where we're trying to completely transform the way we do teaching and learning through challenge-oriented, student-centered learning. And industry has come forward to help collaborate on that project and to fund elements of that project, which is fantastic. So this is just to give a feel for different ways in which we work with industry at Botho University. And of course, I talked about the Botho graduate profile. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but just to say that, you know, we try to produce graduates who are knowledgeable, and that's their disciplinary knowledge, hardworking, articulate, innovative and entrepreneurial. They have core personality attributes like ethical, confident and positive, collaborative, and that they have critical thinking skills, and that of course that they are socially and environmentally responsible when they graduate. So this is what guides our strategy in the university in every area, and of course, very importantly, when it comes to industry collaboration. Good. I think that brings me to the end of the introduction. I just wanted to set the tone for today's session when our speakers are presenting. And our first speaker will be Mr. Lerata Pikane. But before I hand it over to him, could I please request Mr. Brighton, who's our host, he's our tech guru at the back of all of this. Could I please request Mr. Brighton to put up a poll question? There you go. You should all be seeing the poll there. So essentially, how best can industry collaborate with universities to enhance the employability of graduates? And we'd love to get your sense of which do you think is the most critical area that industry can work with universities. So I'll give people about a minute or two to pick a choice and submit. Okay, and once a few seconds, I guess, are done, I will ask Brighton to share the results with us so we get a sense of what our audience is thinking of. Okay. And I think while I've been talking, I've actually seen the number of attendees continuing to grow. So that's fantastic. To those who I wasn't able to welcome to the webinar on industry university collaboration. It's a real pleasure to have you all join us today. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides here so that Brighton can put up Mr. Pikane's slides. Good. Brighton, I think people should have had enough time to fill out the poll. Maybe just another 10 seconds and then anyone's got left. Great. Could we have a look at the results there, please? Interesting. So you can see there that I think most of us feel very strongly that the main area that industry should be involved in is right up front at the curriculum design stage itself. And then, of course, in internships and work integrated learning. Wonderful. I'm actually glad to see the funding of research and teaching up there at number 3. That's fantastic. It's an area that doesn't happen as much in the region, but it's an area where I'd love to see more collaboration between industry and university. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Brighton, for that. Could we please have Mr. Pikane's slides up, please, so that he can get started? So everybody, if you've got any questions, you can feel free to put them on the Q&A box. There's an icon at the bottom of your screen. So you can just click on that and pose your questions at any time while our panelists are speaking. Okay. Good. Brighton, could we please have Mr. Lerata Pikane's slides up, please? Excellent. There it's coming. Good. Mr. Pikane, could I hand over to you to take us through the first session here?
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody who's joining us. And we're glad you could join us for this webinar. I've been introduced, so I won't go over it again. And one thing that I must say, I ended my office in the office of the principal secretary last week, Friday, but with a lot of relevant information around that. Now, before we even look into the topic, I guess the question which everybody I assume they would know would be, we know that employment is a contract between an employee and an employer to get paid to work. And that is important, because the key thing there is getting paid to work, because there's a lot of people that are doing work that are paid, that could be paid. And the whole issue of a contract determines that then there is a need to have somebody who will be a creator of employment, who would create employment for the prospective employees. And what makes a person employable, it's a lot of issues, but at the heart of it comes personal and social capabilities. And when you look at the slide, that center color, the black one, is the one that we're looking at. And it's surrounded by a number of things which are interrelated and interlinked and are not necessarily in isolation. And then, of course, a lot of these things can be just out of raw talent. Some of people are just born with talent. Others are taught or experienced, and that's where universities come in between. And you've already outlined what your curriculum is like in terms of teaching your students and equipping them in terms of employability. And the linkages with the industry talks to the issue of experience. And I'm glad you also mentioned something there, which is ethics, which is also pretty much an integral part of the whole thing. Now, looking into the personal and social capabilities on their own, what would be key? Others would be very interested to look into how well a person works in a team or collaborates with others. And the collaboration with others involves a lot of things. It involves teamwork. It involves things along the side of having a common vision. It involves having goals, a common goal. It involves accommodating diversity, because we come from different backgrounds, different communities, different education, different ages, races. So when we're talking collaboration and teamwork, we got to find a common platform where all these things are accommodated. And still with collaboration and teamwork, we see the need for communication, which is the orange piece that you see on the other next to the collaboration. Because you cannot collaborate without speaking to each other. You cannot collaborate without speaking to your vision, without speaking to your goal, and speaking to diversity. And to some degree, collaboration requires that there needs to be leaders amongst us, or leaders amongst a group, or one or two or many. And then there needs to be followers, of course, in the process. Since it is collaboration, it is also very important that we have people that appreciate the importance of critical and creative thinking. This is important because we do not just want followers that will follow without a direction. We want people that will be able to criticize, to use logic, to analyze facts, and be able to diagnose patterns and trends and interpret what they could be meaning, looking all into those things that are surrounding. And we have already spoken about leadership, and leadership has a lot of things included in it. And today it's not much of an issue that we're discussing. Then there is other things that you also talk about around self-management, which is the red piece. And there we're talking interpersonal skills, we're talking problem solving. It is still part of critical and creative thinking. We want productivity. We want someone who's willing to be able to take initiatives. Integrity comes into play. You're talking about ethics. Confidence is also very important, and confidence is also key in communication as well. Analytical skills, we've already talked about it. And then there is a need to commit to lifelong learning. And this learning can be in the classroom or outside of the classroom, whether it's how we were raised in our families, in our communities. We still see that as part of learning, which becomes very important and determines what makes a person employable. And the last part, which you also mentioned in your slide, was around social responsibility. We need people that are aware of the environment they live within, that are aware of the community, that are aware of the issues that are surrounding them, the politics, the economics, everything that is surrounding them becomes of importance to them. So at the end of the day, yes, it will be necessary, and it is indeed competition, because when it comes to education, someone who's more educated than you stands better chances of getting more employed than you who is not. And what we have also seen, and I have had a lot of writers speak about lately, is the need that we need people that will provide solutions to our problems, whether or not they have been educated in the classroom or else. Because what we need, and we have indeed seen with a lot of talk around innovation and creativity, we have seen people that are capable of delivering the goods that are needed, even when they have not necessarily gone to school. And when we started, we were talking about, as government, what is our role? Having worked in the Ministry of Small Businesses with a serious challenge around unemployment, we have seen that we need more creators of jobs than we need people that are looking for jobs. And the question and criticism that has been advanced to the learning institution has been, how come we produce people that have degrees, masters, and honors, but they are incapable of creating a solution to their unemployment? So the talk there, and the key thing is to make sure that even in our curriculum, we equip people that are ready for the market. Where there is an employment, they can find a home and work somewhere. Where there is no employment, they should be able to come up with alternatives of how they can create openings for others to work as employees. And in so saying, we mean we need the sort of students and people that are led, that can create jobs or that can work in other jobs. And when there isn't none that is provided, they do not find themselves stranded. And just this morning, as I was discussing with my wife about this presentation, and I just wanted to get a random opinion, and things like your physical attributes can also determine whether you get employed or not. If you're too beautiful, you might be employed. If you're too ugly, you might as well be employed. So the determination of what constitutes employability relies very much on what the employer needs. And it is important to have the population of students that are emotionally intelligent to identify the needs of their prospective employers or the employers. And having said so, I think it pretty much covers the essence of what my presentation was about within the time that I was given. And over to you, and I would welcome if there's any questions around this slide that I've put forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pikane. I really, really appreciate the presentation. In fact, it flowed very well from that last slide that I had up there. And I think what I like most about it is how you've talked so much about the importance of various capabilities as being fundamental to employability, and that these go beyond just the core technical discipline, right? You even talked about how people who may not have even gone to school can be transformational in an economy and be employable because of these skills. And thus, obviously, the importance of universities working with industry to be able to build these skills. We had opened up to, some pre-questions before the webinar. And there were a number of questions that came through, that were directed towards yourself because you are in the Lesotho government. But some of them not necessarily directly related to today's theme. But perhaps one was, which talked a little bit about, what do you feel is the role that governments can play in creating the environment to enhance these kinds of skills that you've talked about, and to improve industry-university collaboration? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. And what role can perhaps governments play to encourage industry-university collaborations? Mr. Pekan.
Thank you very much. I guess it goes without saying that the degree and amount of, or the spirit of entrepreneurship amongst our people is very low. That is discouraging. And you find that entrepreneurship, especially in the SMME space, the small, medium, and micro enterprises, it is the greatest employer for our country. And it also provides an opportunity for you to know how to be an accountant, how to be a marketer, how to be the HR. Because as an SMME owner, you have no alternative but to do these things for yourself, because you cannot afford pricey skilled resources. So you are left with no choice but to do it on your own. And as you do that, you grow your skills, you grow your experience or your competence around these various, even if you may not be the master of any extent in your, you surely have to get somebody to help you. But also, what we have, and through the Council of Higher Education, we have encouraged that let us emphasize more on the practical exposure of our students. And I know, because I was also in the leadership of the profession, of the accounting profession, and then we were very clear, there is academic education that is needed. Then you need an experience, whether it's that internship that you're talking about, the attachment that you're talking about. As part of admission into the main membership of the profession, you must have at least undergone that. And the third E was actually the ethics part of it. And for you, even before we admit you as an accountant, even if it's just a technician accountant, you must have demonstrated that at least you've been to school, that your curriculum covers the things that you'll be dealing with in the practice, and then that you have at least been exposed. It is important, if you have been employees in the industry, you have not worked in the practice, we try to limit your scope into industry. But if you have been lucky enough to be involved in audit firms and stuff, there you'll find that your exposure allows you to do beyond just industry into being able to be a provider of services for others. And the ethics, it's just the issue of code. In Africa, we have Ubuntu as a concept. It is an ethical framework that pretty much has most of what is needed in terms of anybody being ethical. So those are the different roles of how the government can come into play, but it can only influence by policies and that's it. It cannot go beyond anything in that, and policies that are backed up by resources. But when the resources are not too plenty, it means even the government is not able to address all the challenges of the people.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think that is important, is that we also need to see what we can do with what we have and measure it against the possibilities there. And in fact, I really liked the fact that you brought up the accounting profession here, because I think that's one of the professions that really believes in the concept of learning on the academic side, but the importance of work integrated learning within a work environment. And in fact, you can only really call yourself an accountant when you have managed to achieve benchmarks on both of these and how you manage to integrate those together, which is fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Pekane. Good. I can see that we're starting to get some questions in the Q&A box. That's excellent. Please do keep them coming. I will be moving on in the interest of time to the next speaker, but I will do my best to come to these questions at worst at the end of the session. So please do keep those questions coming in. Wonderful. So I think we can now go on to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Mr. Adolf Ndafanongo. And I can see wonderful Brighton, as super efficient as ever, has already shared the slides before I even asked for it. Wonderful. Mr. Adolf, could I hand over to you, please, to take us forward with the beautiful case study that you have for us?
Yes. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. As the previous speaker, in the interest of time, I'm not going to introduce myself. I think the hosts have done so. So basically, I would like to touch base on the main theme, but with a special focus on a case study of the company I work for, MTC, and our local university, Namibian University of Technology, Science and Technology, NAST. So, so next slide, please. So as part of the collaboration with universities or with academia, we as MTC, we believe in innovation. And to innovate, you need to put a couple of resources together that include now your partnership with people that have the resources and the time to do research on innovations. So hence, then we reach out now to see how do we play a role in making sure that we don't constrain our resources that we employ to assist our customer and make money or create funding for us for this type of collaborations. So in the search of that, then we then look into the industry university collaborations, which is basically the theme that we're going to talk about now. What was key for that collaboration was first to identify the type of collaboration that we want to engage with academia. Since the theme is about employability, we then have a collaboration, created an MOU with the institution. Of course, we are in the pipeline to create a similar collaboration with other different Namibian universities, or perhaps even go beyond borders. So then we look at the elements of focus. We wanted to look at the research and development focus. And then we also look at another element that's part of our collaboration, which is the internship programs. So as the previous speaker mentioned, it have to do with the exposure. Now, for us to create the exposure, we needed to bring the academia as well to be part of the industry experience, which then means that if we, in the industry, we have a couple of problems that we deal with on a daily basis. Some of them we fix them by buying new solutions. Some of them we try to fix them ourselves. But then the underlying element and core part of that is, of course, there need to be a research, need to be a lot of input that's put into whatever solution you're going to input to provide at the end of the day. And unfortunately, the academia is something that they do every day, and they are good at that. We can't beat them on that one. So the only thing that we needed to do is now to create a platform for them to have access to the industry-related problems, and then use the academic experience and the research skill to provide industry-related solutions to that. So as part of the research and development focus, we then look at the funding of research activities, where we have a combination of lecturers and students participating in a specific research activity to provide the required data or required results that the industry will make use to create a new solutions or a new product, or address a certain problem nationally. So now in that engagement, of course, you can already see that as an industry, we are results focused, because we are, unfortunately, all the industry are profit driven. So in pursuit of profit, we are very output focused. So as part of the funding research, of course, you need to put some deliverable, and those deliverables must be met within a specific timelines. That unfortunately then push the lecturer and the students that are involved in that type of research activity to deliver. Now, in part of them delivering, they are exposed to some industry practice that require them to have some sense of accountability and the responsibility that are required to deliver the result that's expected at the end of the day. Or we also then look at the similar mode, which is now the development of research-based startup. Other people call it incubators. We normally have, in part of the collaboration, we have joint annual events to look at innovation ideas. where we look at those that are beneficial, not necessarily just to the sector that MTC is participating in, but also at the national level. We then fund those innovative ideas, develop them further, and engage with the institutions, which is in this case NAST, to now assist these new startups or new ideas and develop into more realistic, applicable solutions. And then the other part is now the internship programs. Of course, all the company can offer internship, but the different sort of internship that we focus on was more a special program, internship program that is designed to connect students to real world experience or project. So basically, our internship program look at the components that require participatory, interactive engagement with the students. When they come in a company, there are companies that take in students just to make coffees. Of course, we don't engage into those. We bring in students to actually participate in real projects whereby they are under the supervisions of industry expert and as well the academic supervisor. So those are the type of collaboration that we looked at in the benefit of making sure that at the end of the day, at the end of these collaborations, we have some output results that are measurable and are also beneficial to all the actors that participated in the collaborations. Next slide. Okay, now, of course, since this was our initial partnership with the academia, so we then, the first year was not an easy one. There was quite a lot of learning things, and we also made a lot of mistakes. We have corrected those mistakes through as well benchmarking with the other industry in the Western world on the developed world. How are the Google and the Facebook, how are they doing it to make sure that the collaborations bring value, be it to the universities, to the industry, and also at the same time to the students. So we then learned that other countries like Finland, for example, have incentive where if an industry collaborates with a specific university on different areas identified, you then get a grant. Other countries are also doing what you call tax incentive if your company is engaged in a couple of collaborative partnership with academia, you some sort of get relief on your tax returns. And then, of course, any engagement, they have a little bit of potential risk. Some of them, the bureaucracy around having this collaborative element sign off, either by management of the two institutions, establishment of the legal framework that must now govern the partnership between the two institutions, be it at the national level or be it not the two institutions. And then, of course, we also have picked up that there is quite a poor support of industry-related research by the academia. So I'm not so sure this is attributed to the fact that the industry is not coming forth to participate in things like guest lecturer, so that they can also share their experience with the academia, and in the sense the lecturers can the students can then take up those challenges and see how can they use their dynamic minds to improve and find solutions. The other one is now establishment of science park. This is basically establishment of incubators, innovation centers without research studies. Innovation centers that are basically not set up on the basis of producing any specific outcomes. So there are a couple of them. We also did the same. We are now in the process of transforming the innovation center to make sure that it's bringing the value, the intentions is that our setup is fulfilled. So part of that engagement, we have we provided funding. So funding in the sense that we are now able to fund the research, the research and development to be done by the academia. And also we went a step further where we then realized that, okay, given the benefit that the collaboration will bring, we went on the national level where we established what we call a national internship program, where we are able to fund, be able to fund students, pay their allowance, and they have a capability or ability to do internship to any other program that they, internship to any company that they wish to do internship at. Not necessarily just at the MTC, but we open it up to all other companies that are able to take up these internships, and students will then learn to be exposed to the practical experience that the industry is offering. So that's the element of funding. The other concept is then the mentorship. The mentorship, this is what we do normally when we are taking students, be it on the research funded programs or project related funding programs. So what we have learned through our engagement is then to see these students actually lacks what we call soft skills. And I think the previous speaker spoke about it, confidence, interpersonal skills, communications. So we then have to put up some restructure programs to make sure that it's also enabling students to as well develop their communication skills, their interpersonal skills. So we have to align our program to make sure that as soon as we are seeing the shortcoming in the students, how do we then help a student at the end of the day to gain or to develop in those shortfalls. And then the other part that I want to talk about is that I think, and this is a challenge that I want to pose to the academia, is to look at perhaps maybe is the mode at which we deliver our teaching. You find at most times the students are not willing to take risk. You give them a challenge, they basically do it as you tell them, but they don't go, they don't think outside the box to say, okay, let me do it either and try my chance and then just present it and see what will happen. So the previous speaker spoke about entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, there are two things that are key to you being an entrepreneur. You need to take risk. And secondly, you need to be a problem solver. So because as an entrepreneur, you must find certain problems and fix it. And then in the process of you fixing it, you become an entrepreneur, and you now get cash flow or revenue or funds to develop your idea further and create employment in the process. What else did I not talk about? Okay, then at the end of the day, when we then evaluate the engagement, we now look at to say, okay, perhaps we then need to make sure that we have enough funding to enable the collaborations and also be able to provide access to industry-related programs, because the industry are the one necessarily that are interacting with the different actors in the society. And it just makes sense that the academia as well is also aligned to engage into things that are benefiting the industry. So to close off, next slide, to close off, I basically just want to indicate to say the industry will only be able to recruit or hire a graduate with the skills that they will make use of. Most of the time you find people with PhD, but when you look at the test, it's not something that is applicable to even any industry. So having this type of collaboration will then also unlock the academic and the students to take up or to do research topics that are relevant to to the industry, and then in that case, they are employable, to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adolf. Really, really appreciate that. I think what I really liked about that presentation is that you were giving us concrete examples of collaboration that is happening. And what I liked a lot is you've also had a chance to reflect on it and look at how you can continuously improve that collaboration, which is fantastic. Just a few things that I've definitely noted down to keep in mind is how you brought academia into industry. Right, so using research to find solutions to industry challenges, right? The collaboration is not just about industry coming to the universities, but also universities going into industry to work through research is one wonderful example you gave. The other one I really liked is the funding of innovative ideas through university incubators and innovation centers, right? Where you're actually talking about putting money forward as part of the collaboration to give it, to give it some real meat and move that relationship forward, which is excellent. And thus creating real impact for students and encouraging students to be entrepreneurial because they know they have that prospect when they get to that stage, which is excellent. I note that you put forward a challenge to universities, that you said that students need to be challenged more to solve real world problems. And absolutely, and I think the university of the future really needs to do that. And I think that's the essence of today's session is how can we work together to provide those real world challenges to our students. And I mean, I gave some examples of how we're trying to do this at both the university, but it would not be possible without that collaboration. And so thank you very much for giving us this example today. I've been going through, I've been seeing that a number of excellent questions have been coming in. I did want to pose one because I think it was quite related to what you were talking about. Naomi here has asked, are our higher education institutions ready to transfer all relevant entrepreneurial skills so that our graduates become job creators also as they enter the world of work? Because you talked about working with incubators and entrepreneurs within the university setup, I thought perhaps you could try to address that question that Naomi has asked.
Thank you very much, Naomi, for the question. I think it's a question that I deal with it almost on a daily basis. As part of us reaching out to the incubators, I normally invite different incubators to then look at what are the new ideas that those incubators are registered with to see how do we develop those further. So yes, I'll say yes. But it requires some industry experts to guide the entrepreneurs, because the thing that I always tell them is, the moment they have an idea, they see $1 million. So don't focus on the money, focus on what you want to deliver, and then the money will follow. Because the moment people like it, they like your idea, they will buy it, they buy into it. But the moment you start selling the idea, they will run away because they look at you, you're just a salesperson. Normally, other people don't like salespeople. They like people that collaborate, that people that bring win-win kind of solution to them. There's one thing I say, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Don't sell price, sell value. Instead of, even though you're looking for money, provide value of your idea, of what you are about to bring on the table, and then people will buy into your idea.
If I may, just going a bit deeper into Naomi's question, do you feel that higher education institutions are well placed to be able to build some of these skills in collaboration with industry?
Judging from my experience, yes, I'll say yes, but with quotation, given that I only unfortunately got to expose to the Namibian context, so there might be other factors that are preventing this type of collaboration in different parts of the world. But on the Namibian sector, yes, I think they are geared toward it. The only thing that is then, I think, pending is for the industry to be responsive to this request from the higher education institutions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adolf. I think with that, I think we can transition now to our third panelist, Mr. Mandla Lupondwo. Mandla, I think again, Brighton, you've got the slides for Mr. Mandla. Brilliant, already they're up. Super efficient as ever. Thank you, Brighton. Mr. Mandla, could I hand over to you then to take us forward to our last presentation, and we can open up to the rest of the questions that have been posed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nath, and good afternoon, colleagues, and everyone who has joined us in this webinar. It's such a privilege to be able to share experience from the Kingdom of Eswatini, particularly from the viewpoint of MTN. As indicated in the introduction, I currently work for MTN Eswatini in the corporate communication space. And it's such a privilege to have to interact. I interact with a lot of young people, most of whom are from the university or from tertiary institutions. But in the line of my work, I also work with professionals who have just joined the world of work in different spheres in communication. On a daily basis, I work with journalists from different media houses, whether it's print, whether it's television, whether it's a radio journalist, and then I get to sense their ambitions, their aspirations, and in some instances, I have an opportunity to work with them, to advise, to provide counsel in terms of how they would like to switch from one aspect of communication to another. I'll just speak generically about some of the initiatives that we have rolled out as a company, as MTN, and bring in a few of my personal experiences from interacting with young people, young professionals in particular, in terms of what is happening in Eswatini around that. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Next slide, please. All right. My understanding of employability is that we are looking at a scenario where people have competencies, but they are unable, that matches their skill, that matches their experience. So this is somewhat distinct from unemployment, where this refers to lack of employment. So it's basically a scenario where, excuse me, you have people that are qualified, people that are competent, but they are struggling to get opportunities to do meaningful work. But first of all, I would like to say that as we talk about the issue of employability, I think in the employer-employee relationship, what basically happens is that you provide a service as indicated by our first speaker, and then you get remunerated for providing that service or skill. Essentially, you solve a problem, and then you get paid for solving a problem. So that is basically what employability is about. In other words, the thing that we need to focus on is people's capacity to solve problems, because we can talk about employment, but if we overlook the fact that people get employed because they identify a problem, solve a problem, then we would have lost. So I wanted just to underscore that. I know that it has been indicated by the first speaker that much as we talk about employment, essentially we're talking about the resolution of problem. We need to groom, we need to assist our young graduates to be able to resolve problems in communities. And as they resolve these problems in communities, then they get paid for resolving those particular problems. Next slide, please. All right, I decided to highlight just a few initiatives that I've seen work in the context of Eswatini. And one of the things that has worked for us in terms of contributing to enhancing employability is the issue of job shadow programs. I know that this sounds way backward, wherein we expose high school students to the world of work. By doing these programs or by implementing these programs, we are trying to orient them. We're trying to make them experience the world of work. In some instances, these attachments would last for a day, sometimes for a week. In fact, most of them would last for a week. This is just one way through which we expose them to the multiplicity of career options that they can take. So this is an important initiative because we are sowing a seed. We're trying to influence their career choices to say, this is where the world is now. Always been there traditionally, but you also have additional opportunities. You have additional avenues. You can now play in a different stage. You can grow into different fields. So these job shadow programs are very important because they enable young people to understand what is happening in industry, in the world of work, so that when they go back to school, then they can conceptualize, they can visualize, they can see what they aspire to be and what they aspire to do professionally. So it's one of the initiatives that I've seen that it's actually life-changing. The second initiative is industrial attachments, wherein a graduate during his or her training, then they would be exposed to the real world of work. In this way, they are able to apply their skills. They're able to put into practice what they have learned in the classroom. What was theory is able to come alive in the reality of life, of the workplace. So these programs I find to be transformational because they affirm, they confirm what the students would have learned in class. So this is one initiative that MTN Eswatini do to students whilst they're still going through training, to be exposed to the world of work so that they understand, so they learn a whole lot more than they would ordinarily learn in the classroom situation. But we also have variations like in internships. We also have structured programs which we call graduate in training. In this particular instance, what happens is that once and possibly graduated, MTN has a program wherein some of these graduates have an opportunity to work with the company. What basically happens in this instance is that the students get attached to different departments, whether it's marketing, whether it's corporate affairs, whether it is finance, whether it's business continuity. So they have an opportunity to cut their teeth in these particular disciplines. They have an opportunity to understand what is involved. They have an opportunity to marry the theory that they've acquired in class with the reality of work. Graduate in training programs generally last for 2 years, but it varies from company to company. And it is not only MTN that offers such programs. We have a lot of companies in Eswatini that are offering these programs, and they've proved very useful in skills transmission and enhancing competency in graduates. Because what happens is that at the close of these programs, the company has an opportunity to employ or to engage these graduates on a full-time basis. In some instances, you find that at the end of this program, this graduate is so marketable that he'll be snatched by another company. We see that happen all the time. But at the end of the day, we have built capacity, we've contributed to enhancing the capacity of the student so that he or she is able to add value to a different company elsewhere. So this is what I wanted to share as some of the initiatives that are very useful in terms of improving employability of graduates in the workplace. Because when an employer engages you, he's not hiring your certificate, but he wants to pay you for what you're able to do, for what for the value that you can bring to this company. So that is why you are being hired. You are being hired because you are providing this value. There are problems that you are resolving in this particular company. So I also want to say that what is also important as we speak about employability is also the whole question of soft skills that have been mentioned by the initial speaker, that we also need to assist our graduates develop soft skills. And in the process of industrial attachments, graduating training programs, there is an opportunity for them to develop softer skills. Like, for instance, they have an opportunity to work as part of teams, then they develop communication skills, they develop interpersonal skills, amongst other things. So those are some of the softer skills that graduates are able to glean, to harvest from these engagements. They're able to improve their communication skills. They're able to improve their digital literacy skills. They are also able to improve their presentation skills, because at certain intervals of the attachments, they are able to make presentations to senior management to say, I came here at this particular point, and since my engagement, I've managed to acquire the following skills, and therefore I'm now competent in these particular areas. And the way that MTN implements these programs is that the company rotates these graduates. You find that for the first 6 months, the graduate will be attached to the marketing department. Then after that, the graduate will be attached to the IT, to the information technology space. At the end of the day, at the end of the 2 years, you have a graduate that is well-rounded in some of the key areas of the business, which again gives this graduate an opportunity to pick and choose which area that he would like to work in, which space that the graduate would want to work in, whether it is in marketing, whether it is in communication, or whether it is in IT. So that is the other significance of these attachment programs or graduating training programs, because they also they also give this graduate a sense that you can also work in this space. Fine, you're specialized in accounting, but you can grow into a different field. So that we have found very, very, very useful at MTN, which is why we are excited to have to interact with Boto University as they set up in Eswatini, because it's going to deepen our capacity to work with tertiary institutions. As I looked through the comments, I did notice that one of the participants was speaking about the skills transfer, not just to the students, but the skills transfer to the lecturers as well. Ideally, how I imagine this program should work is that the interaction should not just be between the companies and the students that are attached to the companies. But my view is that the interaction should be in 3 layers. There should be interaction between the company and the students, but as well, there should be interaction between the company and the supervisors, the lecturers in the tertiary institutions, so that at the end of the day, these programs do not just impact the students, but they also impact the lecturers, because you also want the lecturers to be in touch with the latest industry practices. You want them to be in tune in terms of what industry is looking for, the caliber of graduates that they're looking for. So you want to stimulate an interaction you want to have this interaction across these three stations so that this thing becomes an ecosystem. It's private industries or it's industry interacting with students, but also interacting with the lecturers, and the lecturers are interacting with the students so that it becomes a good mix. There's information that's being transferred, which I believe would go back to influence the curriculum of tertiary institutions, because we don't want to be producing graduates who still and have the same skills as those that were produced 10, 15 years ago. I mean, what we're experiencing in the reality of life is that things are changing rapidly. Right now, we have COVID that has changed the way we do business, the way we work. So it is important that at the end of the day, our graduates are agile, they are able to adapt. And these are competencies that needs to be entrenched in the training. And the attachments with different companies is one of the ways to inculcate some of these competence. I really liked at the outset of this webinar when Mr. Anath indicated work integrated learning, how as Boto University prioritized that. And that's precisely our contribution as MTN. That's what we want to continue to do as a company, to make sure that we continue to contribute to shaping the caliber of graduates that are coming up out of tertiary institutions. So in a nutshell, those are some of the few initiatives that I can quickly share that we are undertaking just to make sure that our graduates are able to meaningfully contribute towards economic development. Maybe I'll stop it at this point for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mandla. Really, really appreciated that. And I also like the way that you also started answering some of the questions that some of our participants had. That's fantastic. I must say just a few things I really appreciated. Your definition of employability. I mean, you took what was said by our previous two speakers and you put it together beautifully. Employability, you've defined it as being paid to solve problems. And so then you started analyzing how it is we get students to be able to solve problems. And I really like that. And I must say it's something that I'm going to take away from this as an element that we should always keep in mind as part of our definition of employability. I also liked how you talked about unemployment versus unemployability. And it's about getting people into positions that are matching with their competencies and skills. And how you talked about job shadowing. I think we even had one participant who sent us a message saying that really was impressed by job shadowing initiative and would like, and actually I said, would like to see more of that here in Botswana. So it looks like it's a participant from Botswana. So that's also fantastic. I really like that as well, how it helps young people visualize where they want to be when they get into higher education and so on. And also about the linkages that you talked about at the end, between industry and universities at various levels. So it's not just at a senior level at an MOU or something like that. It's at the individuals that are working with the students. So right with the supervisor themselves of the student, industry needs to talk and vice versa, which is brilliant. I really like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandla, for that presentation. What I would like to do is I will pose to you as well one of the questions that has come up. And then after that, I will work my way down the various questions. And if any of you as panelists would like to answer any of them, please feel free to click on them for answer live. But Mr. Mandla, there's one question here that I thought linked quite well to what you were talking about, graduate and training and the work that's happening there. We have an anonymous attendee who's asked, the concept of campus placements is not so common in many Southern African countries. How can we bring employers on board to this concept, and I think this is what interested me, what recognition and incentives can be given to them to do so? Your thoughts on this question, Mr. Mandla?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Towards the close of my presentation, I talked a great deal about graduates in training. This is a program that requires a great deal of investment. And I can recall that MTN has invested a few millions towards graduate in training. It's graduate in training program. because we want to move away from a scenario where we attach people and we barely give them even travel allowance because we say they are still students, they are not qualified. Because we want to steer clear from exploitation. Just because you are just fresh from university, it doesn't mean that you don't deserve some of life's basics. Like you need to have access to a decent allowance. So as we think about how great these initiatives, it is important to also notice that they have a budgetary implication. So, and I think companies can work with governments just to explore the issue of funding around this initiative so that they are meaningful, they are not exploitative, and at the end of the day, there is also equipment and all that is necessary for the grooming of these young people, so that after going through this program, we know that this has been meaningful. You are not improvising. I mean, all the resources needed to be there. So I think we need to see the private sectors engaging with governments to make this a reality, because it needs to be adequately resourced. We at MTN, we try to avoid a scenario where we attach people without meeting them halfway with some of these basics. So I would like to highlight the issue of resourcing. And I'm sure that we can come up with fundraising initiatives as private companies and governments, just to make sure that these initiatives are rolled out appropriately and they are meaningful. And the feedback that we were talking about from the university to the students, from the companies to the students, to the supervisors, just to facilitate that, because we may need to have engagement sessions to facilitate the dissemination of this funding. Again, the element of curriculum that may need to be reviewed from time to time, that again has cost implications. So my whole point is just that, we need to speak to each other. Government need to speak to private companies. And this thing of promoting employability needs to be driven from government side as well. It needs to be integrated into the government plans, because I see it as part of the bigger agenda of development of countries, development of the continent even. So therefore, it needs to be mainstreamed into all the operations of the country, from government into the individual companies, that they have specific programs designated to promote. I know that I have not answered you as much as I should, but those are the thoughts that just crossed my mind around how we can make this thing a reality in our countries.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandla. And I appreciate that. Obviously, one of the big challenges is obviously resources and things like this. And in fact, even as Mr. Pekane talked about, I mean, resource is a challenge in many places, and it's about trying to make it go as far as possible. And I think that's what I really liked about the examples you gave, is that these are concrete things that are happening at the moment, and they require resources, but they are happening and they're making a difference. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandla. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slowly work my way through the Q&A. We've got quite a number of them. We've tried to address a few as we've gone through, but I'm going to use this time now for the Q&A. We may not be able to get them all, and I might jump around a bit. But what I would like to do first is I'm going to request Mr. Brighton Banda to just put in the chat box a link at some point while we're going through the Q&A of the feedback form. So please do, I mean, at some point, go there, fill out that feedback form for us. It will be very useful for us. And you can do it right at the end. That's also perfectly fine. But I just wanted to make sure that gets shared upfront, so that if, nobody loses that link. There, I can see that Brighton has shared the feedback form. So please do, you can click on that and keep that website ready at the end to be able to fill in your feedback. Thank you. And we'd really appreciate frank and open feedback from everybody. Great. I think I'm going to get started on our question and answers here. And thank you to our audience for being quite active on this. Mr. Pekane, if I could, first address a few questions to yourself, because there were a few directly, one that you said that you would answer live. The question here is from Siboniso. Makubu, how can I acquire those skills, I guess referring to the skills that you had in your presentation, as an individual, as they are currently not efficiently offered in our education system, I assume. Mr. Pekane, and then also perhaps you can also look at the next question there from Amona Heng, saying, you know, looking at the unemployment crisis in Lesotho, your thoughts about the possibility of prioritizing vocational institutions over just higher education institutions. Maybe you can share your thoughts on that as well. Mr. Pekane, over to you.
Thank you very much. Very important question. And what we have often encouraged was volunteerism. It's very key. It provides a perfect platform for you to learn. And it also addresses what the last speaker was talking about, that, you know, it involves costs, those allowances to students, not everybody can afford. But volunteerism can help you get experience for starters, but also allows you to rub shoulders with the people that will be able to teach you on the experience. And while at it, another very key element has been that of having coaches or mentors in your respective field. It is very important. Most professionals have a program of mentorship or coaching where there is that one person who you look up to, who will make sure that he grooms you and make sure that he helps you evaluate your competences in terms of which areas you can work on and how do you acquire those skills. Plus as well, the university is also able, some universities, to have facilities that allow students to be evaluated. And there's also a lot of other platforms as well, even on the net, of how you can self-evaluate your competencies and things that you can do. There's articles, there's YouTube videos, and a whole lot of materials that's also available. And I'm talking this purely based on the affordability. But where you can, it's something that you can have somebody that you can pay for who will be able to equip you with those things. Now, going to the next one of vocational schools, and the truth is, even here in Lesotho, most of the vocational graduates or vocational school graduates account with the biggest number of employers in the SMME space, even more than those that have done, you know, your desk collar stuff. And it is a reality. And it would be a brilliant idea to encourage as many as they can be in terms of these vocationals. But what we have in Lesotho, which may not be comforting, is we have very limited of those kind of schools. And even then, it's just woodwork, maybe IT here, maybe metalwork there. But the variety can be so many, and there's room for diversion into all those other spaces as well. I think that will be my take on those two questions that you brought forward, Anna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pekane. And I think perhaps I just want to highlight here the beauty of volunteerism. Not only does it help you build the skills, I saw there were some questions around how do you deal with experience, because employers often want experience. That also helps build experience on your CV and helps people, you know, solve to some extent that particular challenge. And also in terms of vocational education, I think one of the things that we've often talked about at both the universities about the importance of vocationalization of higher education. And that's more about building in more practical experience into the higher education experience. It's not just about the concepts and theories, it's also about being able to roll up your sleeves and being able to do things in a laboratory, regardless of the subject area that you're studying. So thank you very much, Mr. Pekane. I'm going to just jump down to a few questions that I saw that Mr. Adolf had said that he would like to answer live. I have a question here from a colleague of mine, Shanta Intrajit, that says, what changes can we expect in the global, regional, and local job market in 5 years' time that universities should prepare their students for? And there's another question around, from your experience, what do you think is prohibiting students from thinking out of the box? Mr. Adolf, would you like to address those two questions now?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much to the people that posted the question. I'll start with the first one. Of course, I think the previous speaker touched base on the COVID. Unfortunately, we found ourselves with this pandemic, and we have to adjust to make sure that life goes on. There's a concept of remote working. Unfortunately, with remote working, you allow people to be flexible, to self-control. So perhaps the changes that currently appear, I mean, in fact, it started already. It's not just something that we have to wait for 5 years. It's about remote working. The second one is about self-control. We then require students, employees, as they are working from home, they are then required to have some element of self-control and the ability to meet deadlines with very limited supervisions or no supervisions. So it's remote working. It's we then require students or anybody else that's going to seek for employment to have some skills of IT, so that they are able to use the tools and the systems required for you to work from home or wherever you wish to work from. So you can see that the world is now shifting away from traditional working practices where you must come to work every day, go to lunch, have a tea break, knock off at 5. So working life, it's now combined in such a way that you are basically at work every day. Companies are shifting to more output than having people in the office. So you can see people are moving into output driven kind of working in scenario. Then you saying come to work at 5, come to work at 8 and knock off at 5. So those are kind of shifting dynamics that are now um, requiring changes in the way we do and the way the university prepare their students. So they need to make sure that students can deliver results with very limited supervisions, and they are able to work on their own. The second one, if I can recall, can you please repeat the question? The second question that I was supposed to attend to? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. From your experience, what do you think is prohibiting students from thinking out of the box?
Oh, okay. I think it's the exposure and fear for victimization. They are scared of making mistakes. So it's not like they don't want to think about, they have an idea, but just to stand up and have the confidence to say, I think we must do it like this, or I understand what you're saying, but for me, I think if we look at it from this dimension, it will make more sense and it will be easier to implement. So it's basically the confidence, the exposure uh, uh, that I've observed that is limiting students from thinking out of the box. So they prefer to deliver what's asked than challenge what was asked.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Adolf. I am aware of the time, but there is a point, there's a question that's been raised here. I'm just going to read the question. It's Mr. Adolf said he'd answer it, but I think it's already been covered in part of his presentation. It's someone who said, I'm in New York and we started a program called Startup New York. This is from Hillary, which allows startup companies to be based on university campuses and can collaborate directly with students and lecturers to create and grow companies. This is working here because companies are also offering tax breaks for employing these students. Industry then gets to collaborate with universities and students to train for real world scenarios. Can something similar be created in Africa? Mr. Adolf, I think you talked briefly about this. Is there anything extra that you wanted to add to the specific question that Hillary has asked? Very quickly, because we are running short of time.
No, it basically have to do with incentive. I think, yes, we have incubators set up, which are industry, university participatory incubators or partnership incubators. But the fact is we need now to roll it out to a bigger, more industry must now come on board to do the same. Not necessarily just the 2 and 3 that are participating. So the role of government is then required to at least play an active role to make sure that things like tax relief are then also acting as a honeypot to the industry to participate in this engagement.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do believe that's a very important piece, is how the incentives work. And of course, those are based on resources and where they get allocated. And at a time like now, governments are quite tight on those resources. But absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Adolf. Mr. Mandla, I think, again, very briefly, just wanted to, oh, I see that one of those questions I was about to ask just got answered by yourself, which is excellent. And to our panelists, if you do see any questions there that you can answer, please feel free to type the answer because we are out of time. So I'm going to ask the last question now to Mr. Mandla. There's a question here on private sector universities do not get preferences with large employers when it comes to employment and internship opportunities. The tendency is always to look at large public universities. How can private universities stand a chance when they have been trying to make their graduates employable? This is from anonymous attendee. Mr. Mandla, do you have any thoughts on this? Because there's a large employer who's got all these kinds of schemes. Your thoughts on the private university versus public university thought that's in that question?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant question over there. My quick suggestion is that there's what we call in the spheres of communication, your stakeholders directly work with them. Private universities need to be intentional in developing working relationship with companies. They need to initiate meetings. They need to involve those companies. And with those efforts, I believe that they can begin to make inroads and get the support. I'm aware that it will not just flow at once, but they need to consistently engage if that relationship is to bear fruits. That would be my quick answer.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandla. I must thank all our participants for asking questions. This is amazing. I can see the questions have just been growing. I do see a few of them have been answered. If any of our panelists, with the time permitting, are able to answer any questions, please do. I do apologize to those whose questions we weren't able to get to, but I hope that you found, at least the answers to the questions that were asked useful in perhaps answering an element of what it was that you were asking in your session. I think just to perhaps close off a little bit, it was wonderful to get the 3 presentations from people who have strong industry experience and experience working with universities, as well as reflections on government, as well as reflections of working in government, because I think it's a 3-way partnership that's important for employability. I mean, Mr. Pekane talked a lot about key employability skills going beyond the core disciplinary knowledge and including what are often labeled as 21st century skills like collaboration, communication, critical thinking, amongst others. Mr. Adolf brought us a real world example of a specific organization in industry and university collaboration, and how they managed to make real impact by research, startups, internships, and also talked about some reflections on the kinds of incentives that would help promote these kinds of collaborations and make them more widespread. Mr. Mandla really helped by highlighting a key point, is that what do we talk about when we say unemployability, right? It's where people do not get jobs that are aligned to their skills, and that we need to ensure that we produce graduates needed by industry in the appropriate areas and the appropriate numbers. He also discussed how collaboration is working in Eswatini, again, with concrete examples. And I hope to our listeners that these examples were very useful to get our minds thinking in whatever position or role we are, be it a student, an academic, or in industry, or in government. Talked about job shadow programs, attachments, graduates and training programs, and so on. So I think we've received a real perspective across 4 countries. I mean, I tried to share a little bit. I mean, obviously my thoughts come across 4 countries because Botswana, Botswana University has campuses across those. But we also got direct perspective from somebody from Lesotho, Mr. Pekane, from Namibia, Mr. Adolf, and from Eswatini, Mr. Mandla, clearly showing that university industry collaboration can work, is working, and is genuinely helping to create the graduates with the skills, competencies, and attitudes needed to find and create work, thus transforming lives and essentially increasing productivity in industry and our economies. So I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to first and foremost thank our panelists. We really appreciate the time you've taken. I mean, it's not just the time you've taken to come and speak to us here, but the time you took to prepare and the pre-sessions and all of that. So we really appreciate that. A huge thanks to the team at Botu University. I mean, there's been a team that's worked tirelessly behind this. Individuals from various departments in our learning, teaching, and research excellence, in our distance learning team, who look after all of these kinds of technologies, and of course, the teams in each of our various campuses that have worked very hard to bring our panelists together. So thank you very much. And then of course, our marketing team that has spread the news about this and have allowed so many people to register and participate. And then last but not least, thank you again to all of you who did come and participate, who asked questions. And I do hope that you really found this useful, informative, and that you have something you can take away from this session today. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you. And I think with that, we can bring today's session to a close.